Hi everyone, I'm Jane Trotter and welcome to Accelerando Piano. In today's tutorial, I'll be sharing some tips on the very important topic of how to make your practice more efficient, effective and enjoyable. My goal in this tutorial is to give you a framework and strategy for developing great practice habits, which will allow you to learn your pieces faster and more reliably, avoid the common issues of stress and frustration, and foster a real sense of accomplishment and progress at the end of every practice session. This is going to be a pretty comprehensive overview on how to get the most out of your practicing. I'll be touching on lots of areas and do plan to go into some of these in more detail in future tutorials. So if there's anything you'd like me to explore in more depth, please let me know by leaving a comment. Wow, that's a lot. And you're probably thinking, I'm never going to be able to remember all of that. Don't stress. I've put everything into a comprehensive document, which you can download from my Accelerando Piano website. The link is in the description below, so please check it out. Before we drill down into the nitty-gritty of practicing, here are a couple of really important recommendations and guidelines. If you can't play something fast, don't. Practice it slowly. Let me say that again. Practice it slowly. I always tell my students, comfort is more important than speed. Practice at a tempo which allows you to navigate all of the technical difficulties comfortably and securely without creating tension. Work out physically what you need to do and go at a speed that allows you to feel and understand exactly how you're implementing that. Think about it. If you're always practicing in discomfort, all you're doing is training yourself to play the piece uncomfortably. And if you don't know what you're doing or how you did it, you can't reproduce good results. The same applies to the non-technical aspects. If you can't read the notes fast enough or decipher the rhythm fast enough, you're going too fast. Slow it down. Your brain needs to be ahead of your fingers, not the other way around. The old adage is true. Learn to walk before you can run. Once you can do a passage slowly, correctly, then you can begin to gradually speed it up. You could try using a metronome and make small incremental increases in the tempo every few days. You don't necessarily have to play along with the beat, although this may be helpful. It's more to give you a framework for setting a speed to work towards. And don't try and play the whole piece at the faster tempo straight away. Choose smaller sections and revise over those. And on a similar vein to walking before you can run, it's really useful to practice separate hands first before diving in hands together. Why? Because you're better able to identify and isolate the challenging areas. Often, you'll need to focus on a very specific task. You'll have to listen very carefully and feel very intently to check that you're on the right track. With both hands playing at the same time, other distractions and added complications get added into the mix, diverting your attention away from what you're meant to be concentrating on. Obviously, there will come a time when you'll need to start putting both hands together. However, having worked on them separately first and gotten to grips with the difficult areas, you'll be able to coordinate your hands much faster and more securely. Just remember to start out slowly first and don't try and tackle too much all at once. Let me state right from the outset, your practice will involve a lot of repetition. Put simply, repetition builds muscular memory. You're training your fingers to know exactly what to do to the point that you're not consciously thinking about it. It's become habitual. Like a dancer knows their routine without thinking about what move comes next. Practicing the right way, laying down the muscular memory pathways with conscious attention to detail and consistency of approach will definitely fast track your learning process. I just want to mention briefly how recording yourself can be a huge help. Often we become so involved in the physical act of playing that we forget to actually listen to what we're doing. Recording yourself and listening back can be very revealing and enlightening. Because all of your attention is now devoted to listening, you can pick up a whole variety of things which you previously overlooked and just didn't hear. For example, a rhythm which was played incorrectly, or a section where the tempo races, smudgy pedaling, or the end of a phrase which bumps and doesn't sound graceful. Recording yourself is also very useful for watching what you did and assessing aspects of technique. Are you sinking deeply into the chords for control of tone? How are you turning your thumb under in scale passages? Do your arms move freely in large leaps across the keyboard? It's so quick and easy to make a recording. So don't be afraid of popping your phone at the end of the piano or sitting your tablet or iPad close by. Press record and observe what happens. All right, you're sitting in front of the piano, ready to begin your practice for the day. Don't just rip into it. Take a bit of time to plan and think about what you're going to be covering in the session for the time you've got available. For example, you could decide that you're only going to focus on the first page of a 3-page piece, and you're going to concentrate on rhythmic fluency and accuracy. Don't be afraid to get reasonably granular and specific. You want your practice to be guided and have a purpose. Next, to avoid discomfort and even injury, it's a good idea to double check that the piano stool is the correct height and distance from the piano, and that the music is at the appropriate height for you. If you're not sure how to work out if you're sitting correctly, I've got several tutorials on this topic which I'd recommend taking a look at. It's really important to get this right from the outset, so do take the time to ensure you're comfortable when you're playing. Then just sit for a moment and feel how you're holding yourself. Are your shoulders high? Are you hunched forward? Where's your mind at? Are you stewing over a bad day at work? Take a couple of deep breaths. Let your arms hang naturally by your side, and try to identify and release any points of tension before you begin. It only takes a few seconds, but is well worth it. Now it's time to get your playing underway, and it's always helpful to start with some warm-ups, just to help mobilize your fingers, arms, and wrists. Imagine you're an athlete and you're about to run a 100-meter sprint. There's no way you're going to do that successfully unless your muscles are warmed up and you're prepared. You might have a set of specific musical exercises you like to play through. For instance, exercises which incorporate finger fluency, balance between the hands, or contrasting articulation. Or you could revise over some scales and arpeggios. Remember, knowing your scales and the key signatures involved will help to identify and reinforce the key of the piece you're learning. If your piece is in E major, for example, knowing the E major scale and playing it through before practicing your piece means you already know in advance the sharps involved and what E major feels like under your fingers. Devoting some time to warming up isn't just good physically, it also gives your brain time to leave behind the day-to-day distractions and begin to settle and refocus on the new task at hand. I'd also include some sight reading in your warm-up phase. It's important to regularly practice and develop this skill, as the better you are at sight reading, the quicker you'll be at learning your pieces. Doing your sight reading early on in your practice routine means it gets done when you're fresh and more alert, rather than at the end when your concentration levels may have waned. Now we come to what I call the working with the raw materials section, which is going to dive down into the nitty-gritty of learning and practicing the piece. Let's use an analogy. Imagine you're building a musical house. There are certain elements you've got to put in place first to make it durable and robust. The foundations and the framework are the most important. You've got to get those sorted out first before you can even think about the furnishings and decor. So, let's take a look at what you can do to lay the foundations for a great, stress-free practice routine and achieve concrete results, if you'll excuse the pun. One of the most important pieces of advice I can give is to focus on one thing at a time. Don't try or expect to get everything right all at once. Here's a plan of attack you might like to explore. In the initial stages of learning your piece, devote time to note accuracy. Work out what you've actually got to play. Don't worry if the rhythm is dodgy and you miss all the dynamic and articulation markings. You'll cover those later. An important aspect of getting the notes right is getting the fingering right. Consistent fingering is vital and often overlooked. Every time you play your piece, your fingering should be the same, exactly the same. That's the quickest way to embed it into your muscular memory. Constantly using different fingering makes the learning process much harder and less reliable. So, if you need to write in the odd bit of additional fingering for help, do so. And if you need to revise the suggested fingering in the score to something that feels more comfortable for your hand and suits you better, that's perfectly okay. The next area is rhythm and counting. A really useful strategy is to just tap the rhythm, counting carefully and evenly as you go. You don't need to play any notes at all. The primary focus is the length of the notes. In other words, how many beats each note is worth. In this exercise, you're not concerned with the pitch of the note, for instance, whether it's a B or an F sharp, but only with how long to hold it for. Try tapping the right hand rhythm through first, then the left, and finally coordinate both hands together. This is a great way to refine and reinforce the rhythmic elements of the piece without the added complication of working out what notes you need to play as well. Use a metronome if you need to, but don't set it too fast. If you're making lots of errors and have to constantly stop and start, you're doing it too fast. Also, reflect on how you're counting the piece. Sometimes counting in crotchets won't initially give you the accuracy you want. You may need to subdivide into smaller units like quavers or even semi-quavers if the rhythmic coordination is particularly challenging. Once you're rhythmically secure, you can gradually start to add the notes back in. Try a couple of bars at a time rather than a lengthy section, and do one hand at a time. As an intermediary stage before including the notes in both hands, you might like to try tapping the rhythm in one hand while playing the notes in the other. Your third area of exploration is to become familiar with all of the performance directions like dynamic markings, that's your louds and softs, and articulation, the different types of touch like legato, staccato, accents, and slurs. Know what all the performance directions mean and how they apply to the piece. Try out small passages and include these musical directives. The notes, rhythm, and performance directions are your raw materials, the foundations of the piece. When you feel you've got a good handle on each of them individually, you can then start combining and perfecting two components together. Think of this stage as erecting the framework of your musical house. For example, aim to have the notes and fingering correct with the performance directions included, even though the rhythm may not be precise. Aim for note and rhythmic accuracy, even though half the dynamics and articulation may be missing. Aim for rhythmic security and correct dynamics and articulation, even though some of the notes may be wrong. By reinforcing two components in different combinations, you're essentially preparing the groundwork for when all three will come into play. Practicing this way means you're progressively establishing a really solid foundation and framework. These steps are manageable and achievable, and are very useful for systematically planning your practice sessions and assessing your progress. Of course, if you're a more experienced player, you may be able to bypass some of the initial steps. For instance, you might be able to coordinate the rhythm of both hands straight away, or play the melody with the dynamics and articulation included. Work to your level of ability and what you can achieve comfortably. Now we come to the other aspects of completing your musical house. Our structure is finished. It's time to get creative inside with the furnishings and decor. In my analogy, these are the more refined, subtle aspects of technique and interpretation, like balance between melody and accompaniment, phrase shaping and use of vibrato, individual finger weighting, pedaling, varying articulation and tempo considerations. In the same way we built our foundational elements, don't try to incorporate and perfect everything all at once. Say a section of a piece needs the left hand to be quieter than the right and the pedal is required. If you can manage both at the same time, great. If you can't, don't. Concentrate on pedaling separately from balance between the hands and gradually combine the two over time. When exploring the finer points of interpretation, try to imagine and hear in your mind the musical effect you want before you play it. Which strand in the texture do you want to highlight? What sound world do you want to create? What mood do you want to convey? These additional elements of style and interpretation, the polishing touches if you like, are the crucial elements which give your pieces character, individuality and heart. They are what make the piece your own. And, to complete the analogy, transform your house into a home. The next really important piece of advice I can give is to practice in small sections. If you follow the method I've just outlined, you don't want to be playing through the entire piece, which could be quite long. You're likely to have forgotten what you did at the start by the time you've reached the end. And let's face it, we're all time poor. So, choose a section of the piece and focus specifically on that. It could be as little as 1 bar if it's particularly tricky, or maybe you could tackle an 8-bar phrase. You're far more likely to embed the music into muscular memory with focused, smaller bouts of repetition. And focused is the key word here. Don't just mindlessly play the section over and over without thinking about what you're doing and reviewing your results. Include a small pause in between each playthrough to firstly assess how you did, and secondly, to think about what you're going to do to improve the outcome the next time. Work the problem. Be actively engaged. Think in between playing. Some of your best practice will be done in silence. And a little extra pearl of wisdom. Don't forget to overlap your sections so you can maintain continuity. For example, if you practice bars 1 and 2 as a unit, and then bars 3 and 4, don't forget to practice bars 2 and 3 so you're familiar with how the two sections flow together. These tips are designed to break down your practice into realistic, manageable and achievable bits, so you don't get overwhelmed and stressed out. Learning a new piece can be daunting at first, but by doing small sections in a systematic way, you can make big strides. It's like the joke. How do you eat an elephant? One mouthful at a time. If you'd like to see an example of these strategies in action, please check out my companion tutorial, Practice Right, Learn Faster. This video is a collection of short excerpts from a lesson where I introduce a brand new piece to my student Shane, who happens to be my husband. Watch as we go through the learning process. It's human nature. We constantly put off the stuff we don't want to do. So, when it comes to practicing, don't leave doing the hard bit to the end, because trust me, you never get around to doing it. Isolate the passage. Try to work out in advance exactly what the problem is and how you're going to go about fixing it. Break it down into manageable sections, just like we've been discussing. And it goes without saying, practice the hard bits more often than the easy bits. Transition sections can often be problematic. For example, if there's a change of key, if the melody shifts into the left hand, if the rhythmic patterning changes, or there's a large leap across the keyboard. It can also be difficult reading from the end of one line of music to the next, or going between pages. You want to make sure that when you're working on these transition sections, you include a couple of bars before and a couple of bars after the difficult passage to ensure seamless continuity. Another tip for addressing the harder bits first is to start your piece from different places in the music. Don't always start at the start. I'll often find with students that when they're initially learning a piece, the beginning is usually far more secure than the ending. And it's not surprising, because that's generally the part which receives the most attention. So mix things up. Play over the final section first, or begin in the middle. In fact, if you really want to mix things up, practice beginning halfway through a phrase or halfway through a bar, not from your usual starting point. This strategy is useful on two fronts. It will improve your general sight reading skills and give you an extra level of security when playing. You'll be much better equipped to pick up the music from anywhere if you happen to make a mistake. Do you ever do this? Go nearly a whole week without practicing, suddenly realise your lesson is tomorrow, and then try to do a Herculean effort the day before? It might work from time to time, but it's not the way to go. Smaller, more regular practice sessions are far more beneficial than one or two longer ones days apart. Why? Because you'll retain a lot more from session to session if the gap between them is smaller. It's all about repetition. It's easier to remember what you did and how it felt. You'll get a more accurate assessment on how you're progressing in specific areas. And very importantly, your muscular memory is constantly being refreshed and strengthened. Then of course, there's your concentration span. It's much easier to stay focused and be really effective over a shorter period of time. 2 mindful, attentive sessions of 40 minutes are going to be better than one marathon session over 2 hours. So, try to have a regular time each day, or most days, to do your practice. Make it a part of your daily routine, just like going to the gym or walking the dog. We've all heard the phrase, work smarter, not harder. We can do the same for our practice. Let's talk about goal setting and motivation. One of the reasons we break our piece down into smaller units is so we can create a set of manageable and measurable goals to work towards during our practice session. As I mentioned earlier, you want your practice to be guided and have a sense of purpose. By planning out your practice session before you start and setting yourself small, achievable goals, more often than not, you'll come away from your practice feeling positive and eager to pick up where you left off. You create a virtuous circle. The little wins you have from day to day foster a real sense of achievement and accomplishment and encourage you to continually build upon them. Success breeds success. And it doesn't matter how small those wins are. It can be playing the rhythm correctly in a single bar which has been bugging you, or improving your staccato touch to make the phrase sound more vibrant and energized. Daily practice goals can be expanded to weekly goals. If you want to have all of the first page of a piece coordinated hands together, work out how and what you need to do each day in order to achieve that. There are practice apps available which may also help to keep you on the right path. Intrinsic motivation is what it's all about. You're practicing for the pure enjoyment, interest, and satisfaction it brings. One of my students made an enlightening comment. Like many of us, he enjoys playing over his old favourites, past pieces he still wants to keep under his fingers. He told me this wasn't just for fun or for a warm-up. It serves as a reminder that he can learn a piece successfully and play it well. It reminds him that even though a new piece may have some challenging passages, he will overcome them, and the new piece will become an old favourite too. As a teacher, I try to make my piano studio a friendly, inviting, and positive place to learn. I think it's important that your space at home is also an enjoyable and calming space to be in. Hang a favourite picture or photo. Pop an indoor plant beside the piano. Place some favourite knickknacks around. Anything that helps put you in a good, positive frame of mind. If possible, try to ensure the room is warm when you're practicing. There's nothing worse than trying to play in a freezing cold room with cold fingers. Also, try to make sure the room is quiet. Avoid TVs, loud computer games, other music in the background. You want to be able to concentrate and, most importantly, listen without distractions. If the piano is in a communal area, you might need to do some gentle negotiating with family members so that they know when you're practicing, they give you the room. There you have it. A gazillion tips to help you practice more efficiently and learn your pieces faster. Remember, I've produced a comprehensive document which contains all of these suggestions. You can download this from my Accelerando Piano website and refer to it as often as you like. The link's in the description below. I am planning to do some more in-depth tutorials on some of the topics I canvassed in this video. So if you have suggestions and areas of interest, please leave me a comment. While today's tips and strategies are designed to make your practice more effective, they have the added benefit of hopefully reducing levels of stress and frustration, which can easily grow. None of us want to turn into this guy. Practice shouldn't be a chore, something to be endured or suffered through. It should be pleasurable, motivating, and rewarding. With a planned, systematic approach, you'll foster great practice habits, reap the rewards, and most importantly, have fun making music.